Harlem, New York. 11:34 p.m. Friday, March 7, 1952. The March air carries the bite of winter's last breath, mixing exhaust fumes with the scent of fried chicken from Sylvia's and the metallic tang of impending violence. Steam rises from manholes along Lenox Avenue like ghosts ascending from the underworld. Parked outside the Cotton Club sits a midnight blue 1951 Cadillac Series 62, its chrome bumpers reflecting the neon signs in fractured rainbows across the wet asphalt. The vehicle represents more than transportation in Harlem's hierarchy of power. It is a monument, a declaration, a line drawn in concrete that separates the untouchable from the expendable. At 11:47 p.m., a dark green Packard pulls alongside the Cadillac. The engine idles with the purr of expensive machinery. Out steps Anthony "Tony Pipes" Marcello, a third-generation enforcer for the Genovese family's expansion operations. Marcello stands 5'10" in a charcoal suit that costs more than most Harlem families earn in 6 months. His shoes are Italian leather. His watch is Swiss. His arrogance is American. He carries himself with the swagger of a man who believes his Manhattan connections grant him diplomatic immunity in any neighborhood, regardless of who controls the territory. Marcello approaches the Cadillac with deliberate steps. He places one manicured hand on the pristine hood, feeling the warmth of the engine beneath the steel. Then he walks to the driver's side door, looks left and right at the handful of witnesses scattered along the sidewalk, and unzips his trousers. The stream of urine hits the door handle with the precision of a marksman, running down the chrome, pooling on the running board, dripping onto the street in steady, methodical drops. The act takes 38 seconds. When finished, Marcello zips up, lights a cigarette, and calls out to 3 young men standing outside Solomon's barbershop across the street. "Tell your boss Tony Pipes sends his regards. Tell him the Italians own this city from the Bronx to Brooklyn. Tell him we piss on kings in Harlem." The witnesses say nothing. They memorize the license plate. They note the time. They watch the Packard disappear down Lenox Avenue, heading south toward Little Italy. By midnight, the message reaches Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson at his apartment on Sugar Hill. The messenger is 18-year-old Jerome, a numbers runner who delivers the news standing in Bumpy's kitchen, hands trembling, voice barely audible above the radiator's hiss. Bumpy is eating a late dinner, lamb chops and mashed potatoes. He continues cutting his meat while Jerome speaks, each slice precise and measured. When the boy finishes, Bumpy sets down his knife and fork. He wipes his mouth with a cloth napkin, folds it exactly in half, and places it beside his plate. The silence stretches for 23 seconds. Then he speaks 7 words that will echo through the underworld for decades. Find out everything about Tony Pipes Marcello. Bumpy does not raise his voice. He does not curse. He does not threaten violence. The absence of emotion is more terrifying than any outburst could be. Jerome nods and disappears into the night. Bumpy returns to his dinner, finishing every bite with the methodical precision of a man who understands that respect is not negotiable and disrespect carries compound interest. 18 hours and 26 minutes later, at 6:13 p.m. Saturday, March 8, 1952, Harbor Police will pull a body from the Hudson River near Pier 47. The corpse will float face down, arms spread wide, fingers systematically broken, kneecaps shattered with surgical precision. Pinned to the waterlogged suit jacket will be a handwritten note on expensive stationery, protected from the water in a sealed envelope. The note will contain 4 words that will become legend in every social club from Mulberry Street to the Bronx. Respect is not optional. The story of how Tony Pipes Marcello lost everything in 18 hours is a warning that history has tried to hide. If you enjoy these deep dives into the underworld, you can support the channel by buying me a coffee using the link in the description. Your support keeps these investigations alive. Now let's go back to March 7, 1952, and understand exactly how disrespect gets answered in Bumpy Johnson's Harlem. By March 1952, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson was not merely a participant in Harlem's criminal underworld, he was its gravitational center. He controlled the numbers racket with the precision of a corporate executive and the ruthlessness of a medieval warlord. Every corner runner, every banker, every backroom ledger in Harlem ultimately answered to him. The weekly river of cash reached approximately $50,000, money that did not just vanish into pockets but paid rent for families on the edge of eviction, covered hospital bills for people turned away elsewhere, and kept small black-owned businesses alive when banks refused loans. More critically, Bumpy served as the iron wall standing between black-owned enterprises and the white mob families circling Harlem like sharks sensing blood in water. The post-war economic boom had transformed New York into a glittering prize, and the Italian crime families wanted their share of every dollar changing hands in every neighborhood. The Genovese, Luciano, and Gambino operations had systematically absorbed territories across the city through a proven methodology: send low-level enforcers to test boundaries through public insults and minor incursions, gauge the resistance, identify weaknesses, then flood the territory with soldiers and money until local control collapsed. Harlem represented the last major territory operating outside their direct control, and this independence was intolerable to men who viewed the entire city as their inheritance. In Harlem's complex social hierarchy, symbols carried weight that transcended their material value. Bumpy's midnight blue 1951 Cadillac Series 62 was not transportation, it was a mobile fortress, a gleaming chrome declaration of black sovereignty in a city that enforced systematic subjugation. When that vehicle sat outside the Cotton Club, its chrome bumpers reflecting neon like a crown reflecting candlelight, it announced that Harlem had a king, and the king was black, and the kingdom would not fall without a war. Children pointed at it. Men nodded with respect when it passed. The Cadillac was a territorial marker more significant than any flag planted in conquered soil. Anthony Tony Pipes Marcello represented everything the old guard Italian families believed about their natural right to control organized crime in America. Third-generation soldier in the Genovese apparatus, Marcello was constructed of equal parts ambition and ignorance. He had climbed through the ranks with calculated brutality, breaking fingers of bookies who held back payments and burning down businesses that refused protection money. More dangerous than his violence was his ideology. Tony Pipes genuinely believed that racial superiority granted him immunity in black neighborhoods, that his Italian heritage made him untouchable, regardless of whose territory he violated. His presence in Harlem was not accidental but a specific strategic probe, testing the perimeter defenses of Bumpy Johnson's organization. What made Bumpy Johnson uniquely dangerous was his rejection of the expected script. His competitors responded to disrespect with immediate violence, public shootings that generated newspaper headlines and police crackdowns. Bumpy operated differently. He did not scream or posture. While others dealt in hot blood and impulsive retaliation, Johnson dealt in cold calculus. His reputation was built on systematic responses that taught permanent lessons rather than generating temporary fear. Samuel Williams, who ran a newsstand on Lenox Avenue for 43 years, explained the unwritten rules simply: you could rob a store, you could run numbers, you could even kill a man if he had it coming. But you did not disrespect another man in public. You did not violate his property. That was suicide, plain and simple. The economic stakes made compromise impossible. $50,000 weekly represented black-controlled capital, black-managed distribution networks, and black-enforced rules in a city where white institutions controlled everything else. Surrendering that independence was not a business decision, it was existential surrender. While Tony Pipes celebrated his boldness over drinks in a Mulberry Street social club that evening, boasting about putting the Harlem King in his place, 3 men were already compiling a detailed dossier on every location he visited, every person he spoke to, and every mistake he would make in the next 18 hours. Friday, March 7th, 1952. 5:16 p.m. Anthony Tony Pipes Marcello sits at a corner table in the San Gennaro Social Club on Mulberry Street, outlining the geography of his own destruction with each sip of rye whiskey. The amber liquid has stripped away the caution that typically governs a mid-level enforcer's survival instincts, replacing prudence with performative bravado. He speaks of Harlem not as a sovereign territory with its own lethal political ecosystem, but as an untapped resource waiting for Italian harvesting. His thick gold ring taps against the glass rim as he describes Bumpy Johnson as a street fairy tale, a local legend inflated by fear and what he dismisses as Negro mythology. 7:23 p.m. The scene shifts to Rao's restaurant on East 114th Street, where Marcello continues his liquid courage consumption while his crew picks nervously at pasta. Frankie Knuckles Moretti sets down his fork and attempts reason one final time, reminding Marcello about the stories that circulate through every Italian social club in the city. Bodies found in alleys with hands shattered in ways that suggested systematic instruction rather than spontaneous violence. Numbers runners who vanished after skimming from Bumpy's operation, their disappearances so complete that even their mothers stopped asking questions. Vinnie Russo leans forward, voice lowered to a whisper, calling it what it is, a suicide mission. "This ain't the Bronx, Tony. That man up there, he don't play like the others." Marcello laughs in their faces, the sound sharp and dismissive. He calls Bumpy a Harlem mascot, a prop tolerated by the real power brokers when convenient. 9:47 p.m. The dark green Packard heads north on Park Avenue, carrying 4 men and enough liquid courage to drown common sense. The conversation has shifted from warnings to reluctant participation. If Tony Pipes is determined to make his statement, his crew will back him, even as they privately calculate exit strategies and update mental wills. The city's complexion changes as they cross into Harlem, but Marcello sees only opportunity where his men see danger. 11:44 p.m. The Cotton Club pulses with Harlem's unofficial embassy of power and pleasure. Inside, Bumpy Johnson conducts business in a private booth, discussing policy with the measured precision of a head of state. Topics include loan collections, police payoffs, and the exact boundaries the Genovese family can cross before inviting consequences. Outside, the midnight blue Cadillac sits under a streetlight like an altar waiting for desecration. Marcello's Packard glides to a stop beside it, and the Italian steps out with the confidence of a man who believes his surname provides armor against consequence. 11:47 p.m. He approaches the Cadillac, places his palm on the hood, feeling the engine's residual warmth. Then he moves to the driver's side door and commits the act that will define the final hours of his life. He unzips his trousers with theatrical slowness, ensuring the eyes of the street are fixed upon him. The stream hits chrome and paint with a sharp hissing sound that seems to echo louder than the surrounding traffic. It splashes against the custom finish, pools on the running board, and drips onto the asphalt in steady, methodical drops. Across the street, 3 young men standing outside Solomon's barbershop stop mid-conversation, their faces registering not shock, but recognition. An elderly woman sweeping her stoop freezes, broom suspended mid-stroke. Two numbers runners exchanging money near the corner abandon their transaction to stare. Everyone present understands they are witnessing a death sentence being written in bodily fluid and reflected neon light. 11:49 p.m. Inside the Cotton Club, word travels faster than the band's rhythm. Jerome bursts through the back entrance, delivering his message in a whisper that detonates like a grenade in a cathedral. Bumpy's three lieutenants reach simultaneously for weapons concealed beneath tailored suit jackets, steel beginning to emerge from leather holsters. Bumpy raises his left hand, palm flat, fingers together. The gesture is minimal but absolute. The weapons disappear. He stands slowly, adjusting his tie with the careful precision of a man preparing for a formal ceremony. His expression reveals nothing. No anger, no surprise, no emotion whatsoever. The absence of reaction is more terrifying than any outburst could be. Bumpy walks outside into the March cold, just as Marcello is zipping up his trousers. The air between them is thick enough to choke on. Marcello smirks, waiting for the shout, the threat, the chaotic brawl that would justify a full-scale Genovese invasion. Instead, Bumpy ignores him entirely, approaching his violated vehicle with the solemnity of a priest approaching a desecrated altar. He removes a pristine white handkerchief from his breast pocket and wipes a single drop of urine from the chrome trim with movements so deliberate they resemble ritual. He folds the soiled cloth inward, placing it back in his pocket. Then he turns to his security chief and delivers a command that confuses the younger soldiers but terrifies the veterans. Let him leave. Do not touch him. Do not follow him yet. 12:15 a.m. Within 30 minutes of the violation, Harlem's information arteries are fully activated. Runners fan out across the neighborhood with precise assignments, identify the man, trace his car, locate his regular haunts, girlfriends, gambling spots, and family ties. The network operates with the efficiency of a military intelligence operation, each runner understanding their role without needing explanations. Phone calls are made to sympathetic bartenders in Little Italy, to numbers operators who work both sides of the color line, to cleaning ladies who work in Genovese social clubs and hear everything while being seen as invisible. As Marcello's Packard disappeared into the Manhattan night, Bumpy Johnson made 3 phone calls. The conversations were brief, the instructions precise. By dawn, Tony Pipes would discover that disrespect in Harlem carries interest, and the collection process had already begun. Saturday, March 8, 1952. 2:34 a.m., while Tony Pipes Marcello sleeps peacefully in his Bronx apartment, convinced his message has been delivered without consequence, Bumpy Johnson's intelligence apparatus operates with the precision of wartime espionage. The network functions as Harlem's shadow government, built over 2 decades of careful recruitment and strategic positioning. Street captains control specific territories, each commanding between 15 and 30 runners who move through the neighborhood like blood cells through veins, carrying information instead of oxygen. Numbers runners serve dual purposes, collecting bets while observing everything, their presence so common they become invisible to those they watch. 3 night PD officers on Bumpy's payroll provide arrest records, home addresses, and advance warning of police operations targeting his organization. Most valuable are the informants embedded inside Italian social clubs, bartenders who overhear planning sessions, cleaning women who empty ashtrays filled with strategic notes, bookies who serve both communities and report everything to the highest bidder. By 3:17 a.m., the dossier on Anthony Marcello emerges from fragmented reports into a coherent picture of a man doomed by his own predictability. He lives alone in a second-floor walk-up on East 187th Street in the Bronx, a modest apartment that suggests a man still climbing rather than one who has arrived. His routine is dangerously rigid, rotating between 3 locations with the regularity of a factory worker punching a clock. Tuesday and Thursday nights are spent at the San Gennaro Social Club on Mulberry Street. Friday evenings belong to his girlfriend, a 23-year-old named Angela Russo, who lives in a Washington Heights apartment her family believes is paid for by legitimate employment. Saturday nights feature a regular poker game in a basement on Arthur Avenue, followed by a return visit to Angela's apartment. Most critically, Marcello travels without security, his overconfidence transforming what should be protective caution into fatal vulnerability. A runner confirms Angela's building lacks both doorman and security cameras. Another contact verifies the poker game schedule and the precise route Marcello takes home afterward, a lonely stretch of road under elevated train tracks where witnesses are scarce and noise is swallowed by passing trains. 6:45 a.m. Bumpy convenes an emergency council in the back room of a Lenox Avenue barbershop. The air is thick with cigarette smoke and competing philosophies of survival. 3 senior advisors argue for restraint with the passion of men trying to prevent a forest fire. Marcus the Deacon Williams presents the mathematical reality: killing a connected Italian soldier will trigger Genovese's retaliation, potentially sparking a war that could cost dozens of lives and millions in disrupted revenue. James Quick Thompson points to previous territorial disputes that escalated into bloodbaths, leaving both sides weakened and vulnerable to federal prosecution. Even Raymond Ray Black Johnson, Bumpy's own nephew, counsels patience, suggesting alternative responses like financial pressure or strategic business disruptions. Bumpy listens to each argument with the focused attention of a judge hearing testimony, hands folded, face unreadable. Then he presents his counter-calculation with the cold logic that has kept him alive and powerful for 23 years. The disrespect occurred in public, witnessed by dozens, already spreading through Harlem's gossip networks like wildfire through dry grass. Every Italian operator from the Bronx to Brooklyn is watching, waiting to see if the legendary enforcer has been neutered by age or fear. Allowing this insult to pass unanswered will not prevent war. It will guarantee invasion. The choice is not between peace and war, but between war now, on his terms, or war later, on theirs. 9:23 a.m. Bumpy makes a pilgrimage to consult with Stephanie St. Clair, the legendary Harlem numbers queen who built her empire when he was still learning the trade. She receives him in her Strivers Row townhouse, pouring tea from a silver service with movements graceful and deliberate. When he finishes his summary, she sets down her cup and delivers her verdict with Supreme Court authority. A man who pisses on your property is announcing his intention to take everything you own. You don't negotiate with that man. You erase that man so completely that his own family forgets his name. The strategy that emerges is classic Bumpy Johnson. Smart violence designed to teach permanent lessons rather than generate temporary headlines. No public shootings that bring police attention. Instead, systematic humiliation followed by clinical execution, the body displayed to send unmistakable messages to both communities. By Saturday afternoon, March 8th, Tony Pipes Marcello's next 12 hours were mapped with the precision of a military operation. He spent the day laughing about his Harlem adventure, unaware he was already a dead man walking through his final hours. In the early 1950s, the Italian crime families approached New York City like military strategists mapping conquest, viewing every neighborhood as territory to be absorbed into their expanding empire. The 5 families had already established systematic control over the docks, construction unions, garment districts, and policy operations across 4 boroughs. Their ultimate objective was total monopoly, no enterprise, no racket, no dollar changing hands in illicit commerce, without their authorization and taxation. Harlem remained the final holdout, a black-controlled enclave generating millions annually while operating outside Italian oversight. This independence was not merely inconvenient to men like Saltorino, it was ideologically intolerable to those who believed criminal enterprise in America belonged exclusively to Italian bloodlines. The relationship between Bumpy Johnson and the Italian syndicate had evolved through 2 decades of careful negotiation, resembling diplomatic treaties between sovereign powers more than simple criminal arrangements. Throughout the 1940s, they had structured territorial agreements that allowed both sides to prosper without bloodshed. Bumpy paid tribute on operations crossing into Italian territories. The families agreed not to operate numbers rackets in Harlem without his explicit permission and partnership. Mutual profit arrangements governed narcotics distribution, with Bumpy controlling retail sales uptown, while Italian importers managed supply chains. These agreements were not friendship but cold mathematics, each side recognizing that open warfare would bleed money and bodies neither could afford to lose. The peace held because both parties understood the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. Tony Pipes Marcello's urination on Bumpy's Cadillac shattered this delicate equilibrium with the force of dynamite against a cathedral. The insult carried multiple layers of violation that made ignoring it impossible. It occurred in public, witnessed by dozens who would spread the story across Harlem within hours. It was deliberate and theatrical, designed specifically to humiliate rather than merely disrespect. Most critically, it represented an explicit challenge to Bumpy's authority over his own territory. The equivalent of a foreign power planting a flag on sovereign soil and daring the local government to respond. Every street captain, every numbers runner, every business owner paying for protection would be watching to see if their king could still defend his kingdom. The act violated every unwritten code that had maintained the uneasy truce, transforming what should have been manageable business disputes into existential warfare. Intelligence reports filtering through Bumpy's network revealed the deeper strategic reality that made the situation exponentially more dangerous. Marcello's insult was not the impulsive act of a drunk fool, but a sanctioned test ordered by Genovese capo Salvatore the Shark Torino. The Shark wanted definitive data about whether Bumpy, now in his mid-40s, still commanded the fear that had made him untouchable for 2 decades. Was the legendary enforcer now just an aging figurehead coasting on reputation? Could he be pushed aside through intimidation rather than requiring the expense and risk of actual warfare? The urination was a probe, Marcello serving as a disposable pawn sacrificed to gauge the temperature of Harlem's defenses. If Bumpy responded weakly or sought negotiation, it would signal that Harlem was ready for harvest. Economic warfare had already begun before the first shot was fired. Italian operators from the Bronx to Brooklyn paused expansion plans and watched with the focused attention of investors monitoring stock tickers. Bookmakers in Queens delayed decisions about cutting Harlem runners out of certain arrangements. Mid-level bosses in Brooklyn waited to see if they should begin quietly poaching Harlem-connected dealers with better terms and protection offers. Policy banks were receiving subtle inquiries about switching allegiance. Protection rackets were being tested with minor challenges. Everyone understood that Bumpy's next move would write policy for the next decade. Either Harlem remained sovereign territory, or it became open hunting ground for systematic encroachment. Bumpy's risk assessment was brutally mathematical. War with the Genovese family would be expensive and bloody, potentially costing millions in disrupted revenue and dozens of lives on both sides. They had more soldiers, deeper penetration into police departments, more judges on their payroll. Federal attention would intensify. Newspaper headlines would follow. On paper, it appeared to be a losing proposition. But capitulation carried costs that could not be measured merely in dollars or bodies. Respect was the currency that made his entire operation function. Without it, his authority would collapse from within before the Italians ever fired a shot. Younger operators under him would begin looking to align with the families. Business partners would hedge their bets. Rivals within Harlem would sense opportunity and make their own moves. The numbers racket, the protection operations, the loan businesses would all be carved up by outside hands. War now, on his terms, against a single target, was less dangerous than slow death by 1,000 cuts. The selection of executioners required careful consideration of both skill and symbolism. This operation could not be delegated to hot-headed street soldiers who might botch the job or turn it into a public spectacle that would bring unwanted police attention. Bumpy chose two men whose capabilities complemented each other with surgical precision. Raymond Ray Black Johnson, his nephew, had returned from Korea with combat experience and the cold efficiency of someone who had killed in uniform, understanding violence as professional craft rather than emotional expression. Marcus Silent Washington earned his nickname through a decade of precision work, jobs completed so cleanly that police reports read like accidents or disappearances rather than murders. Where Ray was disciplined force, Marcus was clinical precision. Together, they represented Bumpy's doctrine made flesh, systematic, controlled, and absolutely final. The strategic decision crystallized in Bumpy's mind with absolute clarity. This killing must accomplish multiple objectives simultaneously. It must restore his reputation for swift, brutal consequences among his own organization. It must demonstrate to Italian families across the city that Harlem remains too expensive to conquer through intimidation. It must be theatrical enough to become legend, but clean enough to avoid triggering immediate retaliation from Torino's superiors. Most importantly, it must establish a new boundary line written in blood. Testing Bumpy Johnson's authority carries a price tag that cannot be negotiated, only paid in full. Saturday, March 8th, 9:47 p.m. Tony Pipes Marcello leaves his girlfriend's Washington Heights apartment, slightly drunk, completely alone, and utterly confident in his invulnerability. He has 4 hours and 26 minutes left to live. Saturday night, March 8, 1952. 7:02 p.m., two vehicles begin their methodical dance of surveillance through Manhattan and the Bronx, maintaining visual contact with Tony Pipes Marcello while remaining invisible to his perception. The lead car, a weathered gray Chevrolet delivery sedan, carries Raymond Ray Black Johnson and Marcus Silent Washington, both dressed in working-class clothing that renders them forgettable in any neighborhood. The second vehicle, a dark blue Ford coupe, follows 3 blocks behind, with 2 additional operators serving as backup and mobile blockers. They rotate positions every 15 minutes with mechanical precision, the Chevrolet sometimes dropping back while the Ford moves forward, creating the illusion of random traffic rather than coordinated pursuit. When Marcello stops at red lights, they are 4 cars behind. When he parks, they position themselves around corners, maintaining sight lines without direct exposure. The surveillance operates with the discipline of military reconnaissance, patient and completely undetectable to a man who believes himself beyond consequence. 8:34 p.m. Inside Angela Russo's Washington Heights apartment, Marcello performs his final act of hubris over a dinner of veal piccata and red wine. He recounts Friday night's adventure with the embellished confidence of a man who mistakes survival for victory, describing the Cadillac incident as if he has toppled a regime instead of signing his own death warrant. Angela listens with the practiced attention of a woman who has learned that her role is to admire rather than question, nodding at appropriate intervals while refilling his glass. Between lies and wine, Marcello sketches ambitious plans for territorial expansion, speaking of Harlem as territory ripe for Italian harvest, numbers operations waiting to be absorbed, protection rackets ready to be consolidated under what he calls proper management. The phrase carries obvious meaning. White management, Italian control, the natural order restored. By 11:47 p.m., when he finally leaves Angela's building, Tony pipes Marcello is drunk on alcohol and invincibility in equal measure, completely unaware that his next 12 hours have already been mapped with surgical precision. 2:13 a.m., Sunday, March 9th. The interception occurs on a desolate stretch of East 187th Street beneath the elevated train tracks, where steel structures create corridors of shadow between streetlights. This is not a dramatic chase or Hollywood theatrics, but geometric control executed with professional efficiency. The gray Chevrolet pulls alongside Marcello's Packard at a red light, while the Ford blocks the intersection behind him, creating a moving cage. When the light turns green, the Chevrolet maintains parallel position, preventing turns or acceleration. A third vehicle, positioned ahead, slows to a crawl, completing the box. Marcello's alcohol-dulled reflexes struggle to process the coordinated precision as his Packard is guided onto a side street where streetlights have been systematically disabled hours earlier. The convoy brings him to a complete stop, surrounded on three sides, engines still running, headlights illuminating empty warehouses. The extraction unfolds with clinical efficiency that makes violence unnecessary. Raymond Johnson emerges from the Chevrolet with movements economical and purposeful, while Marcus Washington circles from the opposite side. Two additional men form a perimeter, but no one speaks. No one draws weapons. The silence is more terrifying than any verbal threat, the absence of explanation communicating that this is not negotiation but execution already in progress. Marcello's door opens before he can lock it, hands grip his arms with overwhelming force, and he is transferred to the Ford's back seat in one controlled motion. The entire operation takes 47 seconds. His Packard disappears into the night, destined for a New Jersey chop shop where it will be disassembled before sunrise. The transport to the warehouse near the Hudson River docks takes 19 minutes through deserted industrial streets. The facility is Bumpy controlled, officially abandoned, but maintained for purposes exactly like this. Isolated, soundproof, positioned near deep water for convenient disposal. Inside, a single room has been prepared with surgical attention to detail. Concrete floor slopes toward a central drain, facilitating cleanup. One wooden chair sits bolted to the floor in the center. A metal table against the wall displays tools arranged with medical precision, pliers, hammers, ice picks, each instrument cleaned and positioned for specific purpose. At 3:15 a.m., Bumpy Johnson arrives wearing a charcoal suit that costs more than Marcello earns in 3 months, tie perfectly knotted despite the hour, shoes polished to mirror shine. He carries himself with the measured dignity of a judge entering court to deliver sentence, his expression revealing nothing. He approaches the chair where Marcello sits bound, studies him for 11 seconds without speaking, then asks one question in a voice conversational and almost gentle: "Why did you disrespect me?" Marcello's response erupts with desperate bravado, spitting racial slurs and invoking Sal Torino's name like a protective talisman, threatening Genovese retaliation that will burn Harlem to ashes. Bumpy listens without interruption, face unchanging. When the threats exhaust themselves, he turns to the metal table and selects a pair of pliers. What follows is systematic instruction rather than passionate violence. The first finger breaks with a sharp crack, then the second. Each snap is followed by a pause, allowing pain to register and lesson to sink in. When all 10 fingers have been methodically shattered, Bumpy moves to the kneecaps. Using a ball-peen hammer with craftsman's precision, calculated to destroy without causing immediate death. The psychological transformation is complete within 30 minutes. Marcello's arrogance dissolves completely, replaced by desperate bargaining. He offers money, information, loyalty, anything for mercy. The promises flow like blood from his ruined hands, each offer more frantic than the last. Bumpy listens with the same impassive attention he gave the threats. When Marcello's voice cracks into sobbing, Bumpy leans forward and speaks 4 words with absolute finality: respect is not optional. He selects an ice pick from the metal table, positions himself behind the chair, and places the point precisely behind Marcello's left ear. The insertion is surgical, professional, designed to sever the brainstem instantly. At 4:31 a.m., Sunday, March 9th, Tony Pipes Marcello's weighted body slides into the Hudson River. The note pinned to his jacket will ensure that when he surfaces, all of New York will understand that some lines cannot be crossed without paying the ultimate price. Sunday, March 9th, 1952. 8:23 a.m. Harbor Police Unit 7 receives a radio dispatch reporting a floating body near Pier 47, visible despite the Hudson River's notorious currents that have claimed dozens of vessels and countless lives. Officers Patrick McManus and Thomas Riley navigate their patrol boat through choppy water made treacherous by morning winds pushing against the tide, recovery complicated by the corpse caught between deteriorating pier supports. 15 minutes of careful maneuvering with boat hooks is required to secure the waterlogged remains without losing them to deeper currents. When they finally haul Anthony Marcello's body onto their vessel, both officers recognize immediately that this is not accidental drowning or desperate suicide. The systematic injuries are obvious even before medical examination: fingers bent at impossible angles suggesting deliberate breaking, legs twisted in ways that indicate methodical destruction of kneecaps, and behind the left ear, a puncture wound precise as a surgical incision. Most telling is the envelope pinned to the suit jacket, protected in waterproof oilcloth, with the care of someone ensuring a message survives delivery. 9:47 a.m., Manhattan homicide detective Frank Sullivan arrives at the morgue, summoned by a medical examiner who understands that certain bodies require immediate attention from specific investigators. Sullivan has worked organized crime cases for 14 years, long enough to recognize signature work when he sees it. The victim's shattered fingers speak of interrogation or systematic punishment. The precision of kneecap damage suggests professional execution rather than passion-driven violence. But the note removes all ambiguity about authorship. Its 4 words written in elegant script on expensive stationery: respect is not optional. Sullivan does not need fingerprints or dental records to understand the larger narrative. This is territorial enforcement, a message written in flesh and bone for an audience far beyond the victim. He classifies the case without discussion, organized crime execution, with everyone understanding exactly which name will circulate behind closed doors. 10:15 a.m. Genovese family lieutenant Carlo Benedetto receives the call while eating breakfast in a Carroll Gardens social club, abandoning his meal to drive immediately to Sal the Shark Torino's Bay Ridge estate. Torino receives the news in his meticulously maintained garden, his first reaction predictable rage demanding immediate retaliation that will paint Harlem red. But Torino's superiors, men who think in decades rather than days, counsel restraint with the cold mathematics of empire builders, weighing costs against benefits. The internal debate unfolds throughout Sunday morning in phone calls between Brooklyn, Manhattan, and New Jersey. Don Vito himself weighs in, reminding everyone that open war with Bumpy Johnson will disrupt revenue streams across multiple boroughs, attract federal attention during ongoing investigations, and potentially cost more in legal fees and lost business than Harlem's entire annual revenue justifies. The strategic reality is undeniable. Marcello was expendable, while Bumpy controls territory, generating millions with discipline the Italians cannot match without significant investment. By 2:34 p.m., compromise emerges through careful diplomatic channels. Marcello is posthumously disavowed as having acted without authorization, a rogue operator whose insult violated standing territorial agreements. His death becomes officially unsanctioned by family leadership, allowing both sides to avoid mutual destruction. The new understanding is communicated through intermediaries. Italian families will not operate in Harlem without explicit permission and prearranged profit-sharing agreements. Bumpy's sovereignty over his territory is formally acknowledged through the language organized crime understands best, demonstrated consequences and calculated restraint. In Harlem, word spreads with wildfire speed through barbershops, corner stores, and number spots. By noon, every retelling adds layers, transforming fact into legend. The tale of Tony Pipe's Marcello becomes instant mythology, a cautionary fable about the fatal cost of disrespecting power. Bumpy's status elevates from powerful operator to untouchable enforcer, a man who responds to insults with mathematical precision and consequences echoing across borough lines. 3:47 p.m. The symbolic conclusion arrives when Bumpy's midnight blue Cadillac appears on Lenox Avenue, freshly detailed, chrome bumpers gleaming like polished silver in afternoon sunlight. Every trace of Friday night's violation has been erased, the vehicle restored to pristine condition. The Cadillac moves slowly through his kingdom, no longer merely transportation, but a mobile monument to consequences, delivered and order restored. The long-term impact reverberates through New York's criminal underworld for the next decade, establishing the template for territorial disputes, clear boundaries, swift consequences, and understanding that certain men cannot be tested without paying prices exceeding any potential gain. Tony Pipe's Marcello's name faded from memory within a month. His body was buried in an unmarked grave in Queens, but the Cadillac remained, gleaming on Lenox Avenue every Friday night, a monument to the simple truth that in Bumpy Johnson's Harlem, respect was not a request, it was a requirement, and the penalty for violation was always paid in full.